everyone. This is Kathryn Rose, and today I'm with Robyn Hatcher from Speak Etc. on wiseHer Wednesday. wiseHer provides on-demand expert advice to help small businesses, entrepreneurs, and professionals accelerate their business or career growth. Our nearly 1,000 experts from around the world support small businesses, startups, and career folks with affordable one-on-one advice that helps them go farther, faster in their business or career. And as I mentioned, I have Robyn Hatcher here today. She is a communication expert, professional speaker, coach, and consultant who works with organizations and individuals to create stronger personal brands, more inclusive communication cultures, and more engaging and powerful conversations. She has successfully trained and coached thousands of business professionals from Fortune 500 companies to startup founders and authors. And you can find her, of course, on wiseHer, and we'll put her link into the chat. And Robyn and I have known each other for years, and she's one of our top experts. So I'm so excited to have you here today. Welcome, Robyn.
Thank you, Kathryn. I am really excited to be here.
And one of the favorite stories of mine that I hear that you tell a lot is the fact that your nickname growing up was Shy, but somehow you ended up being this big public speaker, actress, and all these other things. And you talk about how you overcame that. So, talk a little bit about that with our audience about how that was, growing up and your nickname being Shy, and now, growing up into this amazing speaking career you have.
Yeah, it's like a go figure moment, right? In fact, like I remember when some of my mother's friends found me on Facebook, and they were like, you could sort of like feel their jaw drop when they would reach out to me. It's like, how did this happen? But yeah, I was so shy that I just didn't want to speak to anyone. My favorite position was hiding behind my mother's legs, even in the schoolyard. Like when the nuns or the teachers would come up to me, I would just hide. And it was very painful growing up that way. And at the same time, I'm really grateful for that moment because I had so many opportunities to just listen to people, which is where some of my expertise comes from now. Some of my intuition comes from now, and some of just my innate knowledge comes from. Because being that shy and not being expected to speak, I was able to observe and identify what was going in and what was really helpful in communication. And so when I got to high school, I realized that, my mother wasn't there, so I couldn't hide behind her legs anymore. and I noticed all these people making friends and seemingly having a good time. And I thought, like, I got to do something. What am I going to do? And then it was like, one of those light bulb moments when there was a loudspeaker announcement, and the announcement was auditioning for the school play down the boys' school down the street, because I was in an all-girls school. And I was like, maybe that will help, because my mother had tried acting with me earlier on. And that audition changed my life, because not only was I able to, on that moment stage, because that, it's almost like an AA, they say, when you hit your low point, being a freshman in a brand new high school with complete strangers, I knew nobody at this school, was my low point. And I thought, I have to do something. And the something that I did was put myself on that limb and go out and audition for that play. And what I did on that stage for that audition was just throw every emotion that I had been suppressing for the last 14 years on the stage, which then gave me a role, which then changed my life, because I was able to, every time I auditioned, every time I practiced or performed a particular role, what I was literally doing was changing the way my brain functions, changing the way that I saw me, so that I was able to then, where I was continually going down that shy pathway, I was able to create a new pathway, which was called Not Shy Robyn, and so there I can just start to travel and start to, the way I like to talk about it with my clients, is I was able to dig another path. I was able to cut back some of those restrictions that I was putting on myself, create different neural pathways so that I could then learn how to communicate as me.
So it's almost like you exercising a muscle, right? You decided, I'm going to go and I'm going to exercise this muscle. And as you did it, the neural pathways, they formed around the fact that I'm not afraid anymore.
Exactly. And this is open. Yeah. I love that analogy, and it's open to all of us. It's so much like a muscle. It's like, what is that muscle? And what they say is that pain when you get muscle strain, that is because tissue are breaking in your arm to reform in the form of a muscle, a stronger muscle. And that's exactly what happens in your brain as well. Things need to break down so you can reform a pathway that is stronger and healthier.
So when you decided to do that audition, I mean, what helped you overcome your fear? Now, obviously, this was many, many years ago, and I know you work with clients a lot on this today, because there are people who are quite literally paralyzed, right, before they, going in front of a public audience, even on, even speaking in meetings. Sometimes it takes a lot. So talk a little bit about what that journey's been like for you, and how you give other people, you use your expertise to help other people through that as well.
Right. Great question. The thing is, we need to make our why bigger than our fear.
Okay.
And that is what happened to me. I wanted to make a friend. I wanted to not feel so trapped in a straitjacket of being shy. And that want, that why, that desire of being more became bigger than my fear of speaking out. And so then I had to then create and find a solution to how I was going to break through it. And so that's what I work with on individual clients, because what I knew deep in my heart, even all those years as I was shy, because I've been observing so much, and I was observing how banal some conversations are, or how little people were actually expressing what was really inside. And so I would go home and I would write things, and I would like think things, and I knew that I had all of that inside of me, and it was useless if I didn't have the opportunity, or I couldn't overcome the fear of being able to express it. I knew I had things to share. I knew I had something inside of me that was worth hearing. I just had this fear of letting it out. And so making that what and that why bigger than your fear is what happens. So when I work with individuals on this, it's like I have to pull out all of those things that make you great, and we tend to forget them. We tend to overlook them. We tend to assume that nobody wants to hear them. But what I do is I highlight what it is that you have that is unique, that is different, that is just you. And you're doing an actual disservice by not sharing it. And,
That's really important.
You are in the position of helping people. Why are you holding it in?
I think, yeah, and I do this a lot when I speak in front of audiences, as you know, too. Like, it's this whole idea of reframing it, right, and not making it about you and your fear. It's like you said, you have all these incredible gifts to share with the world. How dare you not, right? That is it, Margaret?
Yeah, Marianne Williamson.
Marianne Williamson. Oh, I'm sorry, Marianne Williamson. Sorry about that. She had that incredible quote about, how dare you not, how dare you shrink back and not share your brilliance with the world. And I think that reframing it, that what I think a lot of people think too, because there's so much noise out there,
right?
Hasn't someone either A, hasn't someone already said what I'm saying,
right.
Or B, does someone else want to hear another voice, right? So address a little bit of that.
Yeah, that is such a common theme, and like, oh, it's already been said. And we all do that. And that's because we are, there's a Buddhist expression that I love that says we cannot see our own eyebrows, and this is, of course, was before the advent of mirrors. But, it's like we are so locked into what it is that we know, that we've been in our bodies and in our brains for so many years. We fail to see that we have a unique perspective, even if it's out there. We have a unique perspective on what it is that is our zone of genius. And we may hear somebody else and say, oh, that's almost just like mine, but it's not, because all of the things that go into it. When I do branding, I have something that I call the VIP, which is like your vision, your insights, and then your perception. Okay. And all of those three unique things are really individualized depending on who it is that you are. Your insights come from your history, your when you were 8 years old. That's one of the favorite questions I like to ask people. Your values come from that time too. And so every single piece that you have of that puzzle fits together very differently than other people's pieces of puzzles. So therefore, what you have to say and how you have to say it is so incredibly different than somebody else who you think may be saying the same thing. So getting to know that and getting to know that your opinion, your insight, your values are important and are necessary and can help somebody. Because how many times, like you've said one thing, like sometimes like you were even saying before, it's like people have heard my talk before. What do I do next? However, so many times people will, I've got some testimonials, like this is the third time I've heard Robyn speak, but each time I take something away differently.
Yes.
Because the listener is in a different place, you're you're delivering it a different way. So, we're all that nuance is so important to keep in mind.
Well, in addition to the nuance, and obviously sharing your thoughts and your ideas are so important because you're robbing the world of your brilliance. But also, I think, and studies have shown that speaking up for your company, for your career, it accelerates the growth. We obviously, wiseHer, our whole thing is like accelerating the growth of people's careers and businesses, and not only public speaking, because I always tell people, like, you don't have to be up here like me doing a keynote. I mean, you can be on a panel, or you know what I mean? There's other ways to share. But I know you're a big evangelist, obviously, of communication in general, but this idea of making sure your voice is heard to accelerate your business or career. So talk a little bit about why you think that is so.
Yeah. Interestingly, I believe that every conversation is a presentation, right? So every time you're talking to somebody, you actually are doing public speaking. And that advancement is so important. And that's why personal branding is so important. Getting to speak up all the time is important, because if they don't, there's a quote that Tom Peters said, you can't move up if you don't stand out. Mm-hmm. And so how you are presenting yourself in the workplace on a daily basis is the only criteria people have to know whether you can advance in that career, whether you're any good at what you're doing. So people can see you going to work every day. Well, maybe they'll see you showing up on Zoom every day in this era, but they see you walk into your office. They don't know what you're doing. They don't know how well you do. They don't know how you interact with your customer or your client or your manager. And so we have to actually find ways of sharing that information so that people know, so that when it's time to promote somebody, it's like, Kathryn who? Oh, she's in that office over there? Don't know her. But, if Kathryn is speaking up at meetings, if Kathryn is doing panels or presenting or offering to mentor somebody, they're going to then say, that Kathryn, okay, yeah, let's talk about her. So those are the ways that you can always start to infiltrate beyond what it is that your job title is. Because so many times we just stay within that framework and assume, and I hear this so many times, well, I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
Why am I not promoted? It's like,
right.
Because I don't know,
Well, one of the things I heard a guru said, I always use like my air quotes, a guru recently say was, don't leave any meeting unless you speak up. She was giving this advice to women. And I was like, wait a second, I don't necessarily subscribe to that, because you don't want to speak just for speaking's sake, right? I mean, how can you become, better prepared when you go into the meeting so that when you say something, it is, it's heard and recognized?
Yeah, I actually do. I have given that advice to some of my clients, and one of my clients took it to heart. But just like you said, it has to be wise conversation. It's just not your voice in the room. And so one of the things I did with her is like, the agenda of the upcoming meetings. What I would love for you to do is research that agenda. Come up, already think about 3 questions that you're going to ask at that next meeting. And so when you're in that meeting, you already have those questions prepared in your head. So depending on where the conversation goes, you can insert that question at any moment, but make sure that it's connected to the agenda. Do some research about who's in the room. Do some research about the topics that are in the agenda so that you can come at it from a new and fresh, really clear question. And just as an aside, this woman within 2 months was able to be sought out for a promotion that was huge, right? And so one of the things that can do is that. The other thing that I love to share is like getting your voice in the room is important. It doesn't have to be always with a question. It doesn't have to be with you being brilliant. You can, years ago in the Obama White House, there was a hashtag amplify that the women in the meeting would do. And hashtag amplify meant that every time a woman spoke, another woman would amplify what she had to say, just so that it gets heard twice in that meeting. And so amplifying what somebody says has two purposes. Once, if you amplify somebody like your boss or a manager or somebody who talks a lot, one of the things that you've done already is stroke that person's ego. You know, so, and anytime somebody's ego gets stroked, they're like, oh, cool, you know, Robyn loves what I have to say. So it's like, oh gosh, Kathryn, I love what you had to say about XYZ. You could leave it at that. But to get your voice in the room, it's like, oh, Kathryn, I love what you said about XYZ. And I just had a situation where a very similar thing happened. Let me tell you about that. So you've gotten your voice in the room by amplifying, ego stroking someone. They're going to shut up to hear the advice. You've got the floor, and then you can bring in your own conversation and switch it to something else.
I think that's a really important point. And I know that during that time too, a lot of male allies said that they would do the same thing, that they would amplify, because I mean, I've seen it, and I'm sure you've been on it. I've been on many panels, and I remember there was one in Boston, and it was 3 men and me. And every time there'd be a question, and there was this one guy on the panel who would be like, oh, to Jack's point. And finally, Jack was like, wait, hold up a second. Kathryn said that. he's like, you did it 3 times now.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, yeah, exactly. And he was a lovely guy. It wasn't that he didn't hear me. It's like he just, for whatever reason, and I'm not saying it's to make men the bad guys. I'm just saying that, that happens a lot.
It is. It's a subconscious thing. In fact, I just saw something on LinkedIn and reshared it because the Supreme Court has that issue. And Sonia Sotomayor is the most interrupted justice in the whole justice system. And so they've just changed the rules that you cannot interrupt somebody. And they have this whole new rule change specifically because men interrupt women so much more. And again, like you said, I'm not into male bashing. It's a subconscious thing that we do. It's like we have been conditioned, we have been culturalized to feel as though the deeper voice, the stronger voice, the most aggressive or assertive voice is the one that carries the most weight. So that already puts women at a disadvantage. Yes. And so that is a subconscious thing that our mind does. So like every man who interrupts or every man who doesn't amplify a woman's voice is not necessarily doing it because they're biased. It's doing it because there's this subconscious part of their brain that thinks, oh, I didn't even hear that. They literally didn't hear it.
Don't hear it. Yeah.
Because they heard the other voice that is like with the whole fight, flight, freeze thing. It's like that voice can reward me because that's a strong male voice. And that if I align myself with that voice, I'm going to eat tonight.
Interesting.
And so the female voice, if I align myself with that voice, I'm going to have to take care of it. I'm going to have to protect it. I'm going to have to nurture it. I'm going to have to and that's holding me down. So it's this whole survival brain that kicks in when we hear specific things. So yeah, we need to get over it. Yeah, we need to be conscious of it. And we need to figure out how to stay conscious of it to circumvent the natural instincts that we have.
It's so interesting. I did not know that. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's something that we can all take into us in with us to any meeting, right?
Mhm.
Is because women do the same thing, like they hear the
Right.
male voice, right? I've noticed that as well. But you are an expert in all things communication. We've worked together for many, many years. I've worked with you, in speaking, and of course, a wiseHer expert, and seen some of the trainings that you've done, and you've done a number of them for some of the our Fortune 50 customers here at wiseHer. But talk specifically about some effective communication strategies, because we talked about one with amplifying folks in the room and things like that. But how do you speak to be heard? I was just on a panel the other day, and they were saying, how do you come across that you're not too bossy or too aggressive?
Mm. Hmm. Very interesting. Speaking to be heard, I think it goes back to some of the things that we were talking about is getting so connected to your why and your value, and being able to speak from there and really understanding the why of what it is that you have to say. It's like, so many people just talk to get their voices in the room, but you want to be able to add value every time you speak.
Okay.
And you also want to connect to the need that other people have. And so one of the things that I am passionate about is the fact that we as communicators need to become better listeners, because a good communicator needs to be able to stay curious. And that curiosity has been lost so much on humans lately. I feel like everybody feels like we could just Google whatever we need, and therefore we are no longer curious. Now, the thing about curiosity and the thing about listening is so connected to communicating, because everybody doesn't hear, just like I just explained, everybody doesn't hear things the same way. So to be an expert communicator, you have to understand what the need of your listener is, what the triggers might be that you might be ticking off. And so, I've heard it said once, and I added to it, is like, you need to understand what ticks people off, what makes them tick, and what tickles their fancy. And so what you need to do is, what is that person? I'm listening, and I'm listening, and I'm listening to learn what that other person is about, what that other person needs. That person loves data and information. How can I talk to them in a language that they're going to understand? Because what we typically do is like, I know how I'm saying this. This is what I'm going to say. This is important because I said it in this way. What you don't understand is that to some people, you're just speaking Greek because they don't take it in the same way.
Right.
They need to take it in a visual way, or they need to take it in a data heavy way, or they need to take it in a more emotionally connected way. So by listening to understand who it is that you're talking to and getting curious as to how they process information, that's one way you can then start to really shape your communication so that it is heard. So when you're talking about being heard, it means that you need to sometimes reshape your communication depending on who it is that you're talking to, depending on what group you're talking to, depending on what message it is. It's like nobody's going to want to hear do this, but they will hear, what? If you do this, you're going to win. People get motivated by what's in it for them.
Again, yes,
So
absolutely.
the answer of like how to really compose a communication to get through is to listen to see how can I align that with what that person needs? How can I align that with what that person wants, needs, understands, values? I feel like that's one thing. And then there are other ways of just motivating people by, if there's conflict, and there are other, like I call myself what I do communication RX, and I feel like I have this doctor bag full of prescriptions and instruments and all this other stuff. And then depending on what the illness is, it's like, oh, okay, let's take out
We'll
this.
pull that out.
And pull
Yeah.
that out.
Well, that's a really good point because I know we have a lot of founders that watch the show, and I saw this statistic the other day: 65% of high potential startups fail because of conflict in the founding teams between co-founders. So obviously, it's a real thing, and it can it hurts a lot of good businesses. So. Yeah. I think obviously with communication, like you said, you have to tailor it to your audience, right? But when you are in the thick of it and things are just exploding all around you, how do you deal with that conflict and make sure that it doesn't completely ruin your your interactions, your relationships, even tanks your company?
Right. Because in those kind of situations, there's a lot of stress happening. So with two founders, they have tons of stress about the financial stress, the viability stuff, the product, all of that is stress. When people are under stress, they get really stupid. So what happens is like just like from a brain science standpoint, you've all heard that cortisol, that stress hormone that just rises in you when you're under stress. And so when you're a founder, you are continually under stress. So your cortisol level is continually raised. So you are continually not as logical or as rational as you would like to be or like to seem. And so when there are two people under that stress, one of the biggest things that you need to do is realize that and take that breath. It's like, okay, this is the person under stress. And so one of the things that I like to share with people in conflict is you have to stop and say and reframe it. And you want to reframe it in a way that, okay, that person just said something that is incredibly offensive and horrible and stupid and annoying. And maybe it doesn't have to do with me.
Maybe
so what kind of story can you create around how irrational that person is being? And that is a way for your brain to take a little step back, to release some of that cortisol and start to reframe so you can be the rational one. And so, for instance, it's like if you're doing all this, is like, then I would say, oh, I know. Kathryn had trouble with her son today. I think that's why she's acting out like this. It doesn't even need to be true.
Right.
But all it needs to do is to have your brain then just say, oh, yeah, and have a little bit of empathy for that person, because maybe their wife or their son is like, yeah, I can understand why they would be that. So you take that breath and then you have one of those, what I like to call love conversations. And your love conversation is you want to listen for what might be going on. What is really the stressor there? And then you say something that says that you understand what that person is going through. And you say that by saying that, first of all, you reframed it in your own head. As soon as you say, Kathryn, I really understand why you reacted X, Y, Z, their cortisol level is going to start to lower because then they're feeling understood. And then the V in love is to validate something that they've just said. It's like, it's so true that we needed that delivery a week ago. We needed it. You're so absolutely right. Then your last is to express something that might be different from what that original argument is. And then you do that by just saying, and if we had done it a week ago, we wouldn't have had this brilliant person to be able to deliver it. And I'm wondering how we can move forward, even though we're maybe 2 or 3 days late. And I'm wondering, so you ask questions.
Okay.
Again, those questions will lower that cortisol rate and then force that person to see, maybe I am being unreasonable. Maybe there is a thing. So you want to have that give and take, that kind of relationship, but knowing that conflict is so normal. And a lot of times also conflicts will come because their styles are mismatched, or because their styles are so much alike and they're making assumptions about the other one.
Okay. Yeah, because I know, I mean, as a new founder, as a new manager and things like that, over the years, you find yourself sometimes, why didn't they know that? Or why didn't they know I wanted that? Right. And
Exactly.
so it's something that I've had to work on, my whole career, about making sure that I'm very, that I'm very specific. And one of the things that being a mom taught me is that there's nothing wrong with explaining. Right? So I'll say to, my coworker or one of the people on my team, here's what we're trying to achieve, and this is how I think we can achieve it, but I want to hear from you, from your perspective, so that way they don't give me something and I'm like, why'd you give me this?
Right.
And I know sometimes, especially as a founder, I mean, you're running at light speed, everything's a fire drill, and so sometimes I think we forget that, we take that for granted on people.
Yeah. And what you said earlier is so on point. Is like, we assume that people are in our heads and they can read our minds. And that again goes to that mismatch in the communication style. So you might say, I need this by next Tuesday, or I need this by XYZ, or I need this like XYZ, but your XYZ may be completely different than your partner's XYZ. Okay. And so that's why that explanation is so important. And to continually have that conversation is like, what do you hear me saying? Or what do you like, even have people like echo back? It's like, okay, yeah, this is what I think. Now, what do you think about what I just said? Because then you could get them to repeat and understand that, oh, no, that's not at all what I said. So those kind of things are really, really important, because that assumption, I feel like, to your point, that I think is the biggest assumption between co-founders, is that making that assumption that because we're co-founders, we think alike, and we know the same things, and we know the importance of each thing. And slowly but surely, what you find out is like, what we had this really groovy conversation before, but the way that person does something is completely different than the way I do it. But I made the assumption that it was this one way, and it was clear. So clarity is really important. Getting things in writing is really important, so that there is no question, getting people to repeat back what it is that you're saying or share. And I love how you said, how would you do it? And it's like, people like ask, don't, I love the term, I don't even know if I coined it or whatever, but ask, don't tell leadership, like, instead of like telling somebody what to do, ask them how they think they should do it. Ask them asking them questions is always, and that again is back to curiosity is the answer for all of your communication issues.
Yeah, and I found that oftentimes you get much more innovative answers, because I might think it has to happen one way, and then I back off and I think, okay, well, this is what I'm trying to solve for. Yeah. So how can we get there? And they'll have all these amazing ideas. So it's been really, really helpful for me. But one of the other things that you mentioned in there's that overwhelm, right? And so I think particularly for women, I see it a lot, because we have so many other things, like I'm a founder, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, like all these kinds of things. And then you're constantly being asked to do more and more and more. And there's like that old saying, like, if you want something done, give it to a busy woman. But at some point it becomes overwhelming. And I know that, you have some really good strategies around, saying no, and how to do that in a way that it feels comfortable and good, because it's a protective mechanism, right?
Right. Yeah, every time, I mean, that old adage, every time you say no to one thing, you say yes to something else. And that yes, the things that you're saying yes to, going back again to making yourself a priority. Sometimes you need to make yourself the priority of, that's what I'm saying yes to. I'm saying yes to, and we have a limited amount of resources. And the more we utilize those resources, if we use them up, then we become so less productive. And so, like, on any given day, there's this willpower scale. It's like, if you start doing all of this stuff, then you start having a diminishing effect on the work that you're doing. So you are no good to anybody when you overcommit. You are no good to anybody, especially yourself, when you let people cross your boundaries. So that's one of the ways that you want to think about when you're prioritizing things. So Where am I going to get the most bang for my buck? Is this really going to hurt me emotionally? Is it going to hurt me physically? Is it going to hurt me this way? And then having that real clear conversation with the other person. It's okay. No is a complete sentence. And a lot of times we try to make all these excuses, which then translates not as a no, but as a maybe. And that means, it's like that whack-a-mole. It's like, you thought you said no, and then, all of a sudden they come back. It's like, well, how did they come back?
Happens
because you actually never said no.
Happens all the time because you never said no. Exactly.
Yeah. You never said no. It's like, thank you so much. I would love to be able to do this. And because of the commitments I have here, and because of the priority of this, I'm going to have to decline. However, if you need me to recommend somebody, I will feel free. Or, and if it's something that you might want to get back to later, then say, come back to me in a specified amount of time.
Okay.
For me to discuss, not just later. And that's only if you have some intent to do it.
Yeah.
And it's okay to just say, you know what, that doesn't fit with my priorities right now.
Well, because I also find sometimes that people say yes and they have the best of intentions and they're overwhelmed and they can't get it done. So it just makes more conflict.
Yeah. And it makes you just do 60% of everything else, 60 or 40%. Whereas, if you had said no, you could have given 100% and did a much better job. And so I feel like that's what keeps us down so much, is that we're doing more than we should and not doing great at what we should be doing great at, because we're overextended.
Well, we just have time for one more question. So I wanted to ask, you of all the tips that you have, and we did talk about a number of different topics, but just give our audience some top 3 to 5 tips on effective communication strategies.
Yeah, the top tips I have was, instead of listening to win or listening to fix, listen to learn your other person's type. The other thing is, how you are perceived is how you are received, which impacts what you can achieve. So perception and how you're coming across, how you actually look when you communicate, is something that we sometimes like to forget about or like to assume is not as important. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter what I look like. I'm brilliant. But again, back to our survival brain, sometimes it does matter. Do you actually look confident when you're saying that? Are you standing in a confident way? Does your voice sound like it's confident? These are all parts of communication that are intertwined and cannot be separated. So make sure that your visual and your nonverbals are matching what it is that you have to say and who it is that you are. So that's 2. And I think the third one is, what was the third? Oh, know your why. Know your why. Why are you speaking? What is in it for that other person? The why is so important. And if you don't have a strong enough why, then just don't talk.
Then please just
get out.
It's all the time. Sometimes in my meetings, I'm like, why did they just say that?
Yeah.
Or sometimes I do it. I'm like, oh, why did I just say
I know. I know. And then you catch yourself mid-sentence, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's like, why did I even start this sentence? Okay, next. Does anyone want any coffee? Well, thank you so much, Robyn. It's such a pleasure to always speak with you and get some of your time and get some more of your tips and the great reminders too for all of us out there. And I think one of the most important things I heard you say today was about the importance of listening, and the fact that, one of the things that really impacted you, being that, you were so shy when you were growing up, is that you took it as an opportunity to really understand people and listen to their stories and see and hear effective communication, and just as important, ineffective communication. And it really
heard a lot of that.
shaped your shaped what you're doing. So Thank you very much. And if you want to get a deeper dive on all things communication, please head over to Robyn's expert profile on wiseHer.com, and we'll be posting the link into the chat at the end. And if you have any other business or career burning questions or challenges that you're facing, we have, as I mentioned in the beginning, over 1,000 experts from around the world that are there to help you affordably accelerate your business or career. So thank you again, Robyn. We'll see you all next time on Ask the Expert Live. And if you want to keep up with our topics, head over to goasktheexpert.com and get on our list. Thanks again, Robyn.
Thank you, Kathryn.